This is Talking Foreign Policy, a critical look at Canada's role abroad, and I'm Eve Engler. Today we're going to be talking about Canadians and Americans fighting in the Israeli military. Recently, a new website titled Find IDF Soldiers was put online that details 85 different Canadians who fought in the Israeli military recently. The site has made all kinds of waves. It was taken down. It's not exactly clear why. It's been attacked by a member of the Israeli Knesset, by Israeli official in Canada, by Israeli media, by some within the Canadian media, Israel Lobby in Canada. And people can check that out. Find IDF soldiers online. To discuss the site and maybe a bit about how Canadians and, for that matter, Americans would end up in the Israeli military, we are fortunate to have with us Jacob Epstein. Who grew up in a religious Jewish Orthodox family, and he himself went to join the Israeli military, to move to Israel and join the Israeli military. So first of all, thanks for coming on. And what's your reaction to this website, Find IDF Soldiers? Your initial reaction, Jacob?
It's not surprising at all. I mean, there's an entire community and world of people over here in Israel, Palestine, where that is made up of these people, of these expats from North America, from the religious modern Orthodox schools, who all come from a similar world, who all grew up going to similar style summer camps and had familiarity with each other from before, who ultimately come and create a new community over here. I mean, just from the vastness of it here, it's the fact that you only see 85 is almost quite funny to me because it's much, much larger.
Yeah, we know that there have been hundreds, probably almost certainly 1,000 plus Canadians who've joined the Israeli military. This is just a site. I guess it's the initial, and it's people who's already in the public domain. So they've listed names and they have sort of public details based upon articles or stories that these 85 individuals have sort of published or is public. Now, okay, so tell us about your experience and how do you end up I believe you grew up in Florida in Boca Raton, Florida. How do you end up joining the Israeli military?
So I grew up in a at times secular, at times my family was more Orthodox, but it was very much a Zionist family. My parents had met in Israel, and I grew up on hearing those stories. Beyond hearing those stories from my family of how Israel was a land for a people without a land, or it was empty land, essentially saying that Palestinians didn't exist, which is what I was inculcated in. It was the schooling, it was everything. I mean, I was looking for, I was looking for independence, but also I was looking to join and to become part of this myth that I was sold, and that I firmly believed in at the time of this mythic rebirth, clean rebirth. In other words, in the story that they had told us, we had never done wrong. The idea that there was ever a Nakba, that there was ever land that was stolen from Palestinians, that there was ever uh, Palestinians who were purposefully killed. Um, we were taught that all of that was anti-Semitic lies and that the whole world was against us. So, based on that understanding of reality, which I think you can see reflected today in many of these communities and the way that they react and are currently reacting to everything going on, um, it was like, yeah, I'm going to go serve the good guys. Like, it made the most sense at the time. And it was something that I dreamed of.
And so we know there's like a whole institutional um kind of project of engendering this Zionist ethos, and also in actually bringing Canadians or American youth to the Israel and to joining the Israeli military. Like there's one school in Toronto, B'nai Akiva or Orchaim High School, where apparently one report in the Canadian Jewish News said that a quarter, 25% of the male graduates joined the Israeli military. We know also that this biggest private high school in Canada, Tannenbaum Chat in Toronto, they have IDF days, and they have all kinds of, they bring in former Israeli soldiers or current Israeli soldiers to speak to the grade 11s and 12s, kind of when they may be making up their mind about what they're going to do after high school. Um, and so these are all registered charities, I should point out. They're subsidized by the Canadian taxpayer. And there's a sort of sense that, they are doing at some level some degree of kind of inducement of young people to joining the Israeli military. Now, the inducement, I use that word inducement because it has a potential legal ramification because under Canada's Foreign Enlistment Act, it's contrary to the law to induce a Canadian to join another country or assist another country's military. And so yeah, what's your experience? I know that you said when we were talking previously, you have I think a relative that went to this Ben Akiva school in Toronto. How do you sort of make sense of that kind of dynamic, or what did you see in terms of that dynamic, in terms of that school specifically, in terms of kind of pushing joining the Israeli military, going to Israel and joining the Israeli military?
So yeah, so I have a family member who attended Orach Chaim before they moved down to Florida. Um, I can't speak too much to Orach Chaim in particular, but what I can speak to is I know, and I had friends who were there. I remember meeting someone casually one day on base in the army who ended up telling me, "Oh, I went to Orach Chaim with your brother-in-law." That's how I know that my brother-in-law went to Orach Chaim because of the mutual friend that I ended up making in the army. Um, Really, all of these modern Orthodox schools, which modern Orthodoxy is a specific subset of Orthodoxy, of Orthodox Judaism in America, and I think America is fair to say, both because it's the entirety of North America. Um, Orthodoxy is a very small group. I mean, it's the smallest group of any denomination within Judaism. So it's also very tightly networked. All of the modern Orthodox schools, everyone knows each other. Everyone grows up going to similar summer camps. I mean, it's really quite intertwined. So what the experience that they have at Orach Chaim with the Israel Fair, I guess you might call it. Each school does it slightly different, but seniors usually um, will, I'll say it a different way. Over the first couple months of the school year, representatives of different yeshivas, Army preparatory programs, Israel college programs sometimes, depending on the particular place, will come and they'll tour around North America, going between the different population centers, going between the different schools where in order to recruit students. That's how I ended up in my first year in Israel. Ultimately, I should say the head of my yeshiva that I went to was an officer in the tanks in the IDF during, I think it was the first Lebanon War. I mean, I can't count how many bloody stories he told us in yeshiva of, yeah, of the thing, of stories of things that he had done or that he had encountered in the IDF. It's a very, there's a range of programs, but there are many of which are quite Zionist. I mean, the person who came as the recruiter, it wasn't the head of the yeshiva, it was another person. And he came in and started, I remember he freaked me out when I first met him. He came in and he started yelling at us as if we were soldiers. And my initial reaction was like, hell no, I'm not going to that place. I ended up deciding to go to that place. And I mean, part of his religious, spiritual practice with us was every day we would be doing push ups on the roof of the yeshiva. And then a couple times over the course of the yeshiva year, we ended up going on stretcher runs. And these are programs that, I mean, everyone, I would say, is exposed to these types of things. Um, and I would say that I know in my year, again, these are very small populations. My year, we were the biggest graduating class at the time, and we were 80 kids in the entire grade. I think a full 10% of us ended up, if not more, ended up uh, moving to Israel. Most of us ended up joining the army of those who moved to Israel. Um, and it's very normalized. I mean, I need to emphasize this. My school, until I essentially realized, wait, what I did was wrong. But until I realized that, my school would message me every year around Israeli Remembrance Day, Israeli Independence Day, and say, "Hey, send us a picture of you in uniform. We'll post it on the wall of your of the yeshiva." And I remember seeing the people. I remember when I was a student in my yeshiva high school, that seeing these pictures on the walls of the students who had come before me who ended up going and joining the IDF. And I remember then becoming part of it and having to send pictures every single year. And I know with certainty, having looked into this, this is something that happens across all of these yeshivas. If you look at all of these yeshiva high schools, it's it's not a secret. Like it's something that people take pride in. Like, look, there's that one. He went off to serve the Jewish people in the IDF, and they take tremendous pride in these people. Um, when students come back, sometimes they'll give them an opportunity to speak, which you'll see at different you'll see different examples of this online. The reason you'll see this online is because the degree to which people take pride in this, local Jewish press will often report on this in a celebratory or positive fashion. I mean, it's why it's really, really, really easy to find this stuff. I mean, if you go on to your local JCC's website and you look around, really not even all that hard, you'll find a list of Mazal Tov to this one on drafting into the IDF, just like a casual, as if it's a birthday. Um, these are things that are incredibly, incredibly common. I should say, yeah. Um, so it's definitely there's definitely a systematic aspect there. There's also some of these yeshivas, they're called Hesder yeshivas. They're directly themselves integrated with the IDF. So normally the Hesder yeshivas are specifically considered the more prestigious ones, like the most religiously fervent students end up at these. It's a set of four yeshivas. Um, and a significant portion of those students will then go on to draft into the IDF. I mean, you can look them up on Wikipedia. Hesder is a system that allows religious Zionists to serve a shortened military service in return for spending a 5 year total period within this yeshiva environment. And it's in the middle time of that 5 years that they go and they draft together as a class. So their yeshiva class together serves as a unit. Um, and these are popular. I mean, there's many more than four here in Israel, but there's four that have a strong North American presence, and a significant portion of them draft. I mean, there's many different ways for people to draft. I mean, that's just one. I did something called Gareen Sabar, which was covered recently by a good friend in Michael West in an article he wrote in Australia. But Gareen Sabar is just as active in North America. It's a program run by the Israel Scouts that uh, expedites the process. They run first a series of seminars to prep North Americans, but also others. I think they might be active in Europe, um, to see. Essentially, it's a filtering process to see which of these kids actually want to uh, go in and join the IDF. And it's three seminars prepping them on Israeliness and all these other things. And then you get to Israel, and they set you up together with that group of people you did the seminars with on a kibbutz. And because they're integrated with the IDF, literally integrated with the IDF, um, they have someone in the draft office who's called Mashaki Sabar. It means she's the Sabar person to help all the people on this program draft. Instead of it normally the process is after you emigrate, it takes a year to get into the IDF. With Green Sabar, it takes 3 to 4 months. It's the only way to do it. There are other ways also, but it's one of them. It is basically the fastest way to get into the IDF from the day you land until the day you're in a green uniform. And it gives these lone soldiers, quote unquote, um, all the support that they need that they don't otherwise have because they're missing because their families are overseas. So it really facilitates, and I mean, I they took us to the Israeli uh, Ministry of Interior to get our IDs. Like they shut down the office that day, and there was Green Sabar Day at the Ministry of Interior office that we went to. They to open up our bank accounts, which is normally a whole bureaucratic story. They brought someone from a bank to our kibbutz, and we had like our little communal living room for our group of lone soldiers, and we all did that from the comfort of our living room together. I mean, they at the opening ceremony for hell's sake, Sarah Netanyahu spoke at the opening ceremony. I mean, it. When I got off the plane, the president of Israel was there. Like when I emigrated, the president of Israel was there on the tarmac waiting for us to greet us. I mean, it's to say that it's integrated and to say that the Israeli state is involved in it is I think an understatement. Um, yeah,
And so yeah, so young, maybe 15, 16-year old Jewish Canadians or Jewish Americans, and I mean in your case in the modern Orthodox, but it somewhat probably to varying degrees in different
it's across the Jewish community.
yeah.
I just only I know most about the community that I come from.
Yeah. And so they would be getting all these different messages at private schools, at camps, I guess within the synagogue, within community centers and different Jewish community center that people go who go maybe you're going there more to play, I don't know, play basketball or play whatever, play some sport, and there's variations of the pro-Israel message, but then also getting into the more military side. There's variations of the promotion of joining the Israeli military, and many of young people will be kind of seduced by that as a something they want to do and as something that's moral or whatnot. Um,
More
so
than that, more than just something it's moral, it's something that if someone is struggling with a sense of low self-esteem, if someone for any reason wants to try to get some sense of societal or social prestige, going to Israel to join the IDF is a way for them to do that.
so it's a form of form of fulfillment of getting esteem. That's
It's
important.
a fulfillment of communal values because it's the community holds it in such high esteem.
And we should state again here that many of these organizations, most of them are registered charities, different schools, the camps,
Synagogues,
synagogues, they are registered charities. So they,
every single Shabbat, the prayer for the welfare of the IDF soldiers. From what I know, I don't know of any synagogues that don't do it. Like you would have to find the rare anti-Zionist synagogue to find one that might not do it. But I think you would find it in the overwhelming majority of them. Prayer for the welfare of the state of Israel. I mean, in some synagogues, the way you'll see, I don't know, I have no idea how churches look on the inside. But in many synagogues, you'll see an American flag next to an Israeli flag, sort of, which with bringing those symbols of nationalism into uh, their place of worship, it definitely does have an impact on you, even if you don't realize it when at the front of the synagogue is the Israeli flag. It's like, oh, cool. This is a symbol that we hold in high regard. It's part of the day to day.
And for you personally, what sort of made you question having joined the Israeli military and made you question Palestinian dispossession and what Zionism has meant for Palestinians and others in the region?
Yeah, so I'll say this. When I originally got to this country, today I'm a secular person. You can see, keep on my head. But when I originally got here, I was within the spectrum of ultra orthodox. I was a religious fundamentalist, is the way I would frame it now. So immediately after getting out of the IDF in 2017, I got married to a person I barely knew, and I moved to a settlement in the central northern West Bank in order to, in the words that I would have used at the time, to hasten the coming of the Messiah by holding on to the greater land of Israel. I mean, I moved into a caravan at the bottom of a bigger settlement, and to me, that was like what I'd always dreamed of. Like that was the fulfillment of a dream. The first time I ever heard and I ever realized that, and this is when it first began to crack, that hey, maybe settlers do commit unjust violence against Palestinians, was one day in the synagogue between afternoon and nightly prayers. There was someone who I forget which specific settlement he had gone to high school in, but he was like jovially recounting how he and his friends would put like shirts over their faces so that their faces couldn't be recognized, and how they would go and attack the Arab villages next door to the settlement that their yeshiva, that their whatever was at. That was the first time I realized, oh wait, maybe it's not anti-Semitic to say that Jews attack Arabs or that Jews attack Palestinians. And then the first time I ever learned that it wasn't an anti-Semitic conspiracy to say that Jews or Israelis steal Palestinian land was one day in that same settlement where one of my neighbors, casually mentioned how we had forcefully appropriated, how we had stolen the land from the nearby Palestinian village. And that was, to me, somewhat of an eye opening moment. Ultimately, after I was married for about 10 months, after that, I got divorced and I began questioning things in general. I stopped being religious. And I was learning at the time, I started college at that point, and was learning to become a civics teacher. And ironically enough, the first time I ever learned about the 1953 absentee land laws, the dispossession laws, it was in a class where I should say I did my bachelor's degree in a settlement. Um, and my teacher, who was a settler from the settlement of Kedumim, where Daniela Weiss is from, told us about the 1953 or it's 1950, whatever. It's a range of years because there were several different laws that were passed in order to dispossess the Palestinians following the Nakba. And that was the first time I realized, like, oh, wait, there's an entire narrative here and there's an entire side of the story here that grew up my entire life being told was a lie that simply isn't. And that began make me question. I started questioning things. Ultimately, I had a friend who was involved with some of the anti-fascists in Jerusalem, and I'd gotten a recommendation of a book from him, and I started reading it, and ultimately I went on a tour of uh, No Other Land was just mentioned, was just won the Oscar the other day. I went on a tour with Breaking the Silence and with this group called ATL, All That's Left, of Twani, of the place which is part of Masafer Yatta, which is part of the Yatta envelope. And I learned there a wonderful person named Becca, who's a wonderful educator on this topic, broke down the broke down apartheid essentially. She explained how this is what area A is, this is what area B is, this is what area C is. This is who responds to Jews who are breaking the law in area C. This is how the law responds to Palestinians who quote unquote break the law in area C. Um, it became abundantly clear that the system that existed there and that exists there is one that's rigged against the Palestinians. I mean, there's no way to be a Palestinian in the West Bank. I mean, the conditions of the West Bank are of constant structural violence against Palestinians, where even when they're attacked, they're then the ones who often get arrested when they report it to whatever authority they're supposed to, quote unquote, supposed to. I mean, it became quite clear like, oh, up until this point in my life, I have not been on the right side of history. I began to grapple with my complicity, which I still have to grapple with till this day. And realizing that the world that I grew up in was a lie. And I'm not the only one who this happens to. Becca herself, and she can speak for herself, she has her own wonderful social media channels. She herself was a lone soldier who also participated in Gureen Sabah. Um, there's another there's many of us who, after serving in the IDF, simply by being exposed to the reality on the ground, realize like, oh, we joined a Nazi state, and it's like, uh-oh, and it's one of those moments when alarm bells start going off in your head, and you realize like, I have to do something. Like I can't have this knowledge in my head and continue living the way that I was before. And it's yeah, there's many other people who I'm sure would can attest to similar things. People from I'm from Florida, but there's people from New Jersey who have had similar experiences. There's people from Canada who have had similar experiences. There's people from all across the U.S. wherever one of these communities exist that people are drafting into the IDF from. People do realize, very small minority of us, very tiny minority, but realize like, oh, we're not the good guys. I'll say one more story about me really realizing like, oh no, we're we're quite horrible. Um, my intuitive gut feeling is to say we are Nazis. I mean, it's the way that I refer to it in my own head. It was slightly after October 7th, and someone who I had at one point considered a friend who was doing reserve duty. At this point, I was already uh, I already identified as anti-Zionist, as pro-BDS, which within the state is not exactly the safest thing to identify as. But I was speaking to him while he was on reserve duty following October 7th, and he began to tell me again jovially with a smirk on it. I could like laughing about it, about how was putting down Palestinian protests in the West Bank by quote unquote kneecapping people, shooting at the knees in order to prevent people from being able to walk for the coming year, 2 years, maybe have permanent handicaps. And this wasn't the first time that I'd heard that type of story. I mean, I'd heard that exact story from more people than I can count, uh, more times than I can count. Um, but it was sort of in the midst of the genocide, with him telling me this, that I realized whatever relationship I had with him is now gone. I mean, whatever connection I'd had to that community, they are actively and joyfully engaged and proudly engaged in genocide, literally in genocide. And they're happy that they're doing it. They're proud. They're writing home about it. It's insane. It's absolutely insane.
Well, I thank you for realizing that and seeing our collective humanity, the humanity of Palestinians, and going against your upbringing. And it's obviously very important that more Jewish Canadians, Americans, Israelis, challenge the system of of supremacy and genocide that Palestinians are facing. Now, So now you're back living in the US. Is that correct?
No, I currently live in Beersheba.
Oh, you do. Oh, you're currently living in Bishop. Oh, sorry. Yeah.
I haven't been able to get out of this place.
Yeah.
Um, One of the nice things about an ethno state, at least in this one, is that we have free health insurance, and that's not something I'd be able to have in the United States. Also, the United States isn't exactly, especially with everything going on now, a safe place either. I'm right now working towards a master's degree, and then my hope is to try to do a PhD abroad to get the hell out of here. But I I do not want to be here in the long term, and it's definitely not. Uh, it's becoming more and more tenuous, even for many Jewish Israelis like myself, to be in this country. I mean, a professor from my school, from my college today, is facing sanction as a result of views that he expressed under a pseudonym on Twitter, because essentially the Israeli version of Canary Mission went after him. I mean, it's and they're starting to pass laws that will also make it easier for them to criminalize things like that. Um, it's obviously Israel was already a fascist state before, but now it's also becoming one for the Jews. And it's kind of this, oh wait, people are I don't know if people are waking up, but I mean it's quite blatant that it's not a good situation here. It's not a good situation here. But yeah, no, I'm still here.
Well, I thank you for coming on to talking foreign policy and describing your personal experience and broader reflections on the question of Canadians joining the Israeli military. Thanks a lot for coming on, Jacob.
Yeah, thank you for having me, and thank you for the courageous work that you're doing.